abuse of medications like Adderall is very common on university campuses. And I remember that in college, it was like a joke that people would take someone's Adderall that was prescribed to them. Thankfully, I never did that because I just had like a fear of being dependent upon anything or addicted to anything. But I had friends who did, and they would joke about like, oh yeah, I stayed up all night to write my paper that I've been putting off. Or they would say, don't start doing something like not study related after you've taken Adderall because you won't be able to stop doing that. If you start cleaning your room or something when you're on Adderall, you won't be able to stop cleaning your room. You'll be cleaning your room all night. It is crazy how just pervasive it's gotten and how almost funny it's gotten, that it is the same thing. It does sound like the same thing as someone being on cocaine or some kind of stimulant that we all know is sketchy and that you shouldn't engage in. And yet when it comes to these pharmaceuticals, people just kind of shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, that's just what I needed to study, or that's just what I needed to get by. And there are all kinds of justifications for it. And I can sympathize with it again as someone who, I'm thinking about a million different things at once. I have a hard time. I have to try really hard to stay organized and keep up with my schedule. Growing up, I was always losing papers. I was losing pens. I was always amazed at people who kept the same school supplies all year long. But, I grew up and I figured out tools to, be able to succeed in life and to be a productive person without medication. And so while I can sympathize with it, at the same time, I think our nonchalant attitude about just medicating kind of normal personality traits, as you're talking about, has really scary long-term implications and really unknown long-term implications on the people who have kind of fallen for that narrative.
It's an experiment on the brain. There's no doubt about that. And so one of the things that I think is really important to your listeners, so I want to speak to, if somebody is a detractor to that last statement, they'll say, well, we cannot compare somebody who's abusing the drug and taking higher doses to those who have a legitimate condition. The truth of the matter is we have no idea how people are going to respond to drugs. We're all so diverse. So people are going to respond differently to drugs. Some people will get manic, potentially even develop psychosis, have increased energy, euphoria, while others will have more enhanced focus. It will calm some others down, while others will create tachycardia, which is increased heart rate, can increase your blood pressure. There's just a varied reaction. And so there's a large range in the dosage that psychiatrists or pediatricians are going to prescribe because it is trial and error. The other thing that I think is really important for your listeners to know is there can be legitimate reasons why someone's having a hard time focusing and they are mislabeled as ADHD. So let me give you some really important examples. In the work that I do, kids who have been abused or come from neglectful environments are going to have a difficult time sitting still and focusing. It's a natural response to danger or traumatic events. We've seen this uptick in girls who are kind of perfectionistic or worriers because they are internalizers, and so they're having a hard time focusing their attention on certain tasks that are non-stimulating, and they retreat inward into their minds. And so that's a legitimate problem with concentration, but the problem is worry or perfectionism. Other things that are really important to know is we are in a unique period in human evolution. This technological age where everyone has a smartphone is new. Our brains are neuroplastic. That means they are very adaptable. We have evolved to be able to focus our attention on what is the most relevant stimuli. So what is the most relevant stimuli? It's often what is engaging to our brain. In life-threatening situations, obviously, it's going to be situations that pose danger. In other situations, it can be what creates something that's really interesting to us. So put kids on social media and video games since they were very young. And we're in a period where, toddlers are being raised by smart pads and iPads and things like that, where they're, watching television and other movies. What does that do to the brain and our own ability to be able to focus to non-relevant stimuli? So we're going to raise kids with iPads in front of them. and then expect them to go into school environments and focus on math or science or a teacher. So that's something that we have to really look at, is how the brain is adapting to this new technology. Again, the ethical question is, does that mean it's a disorder? No, I think a lot of people would say that the brain is designed to adapt to the most relevant of situations, and there's a lot of diversity. So you as in the media who likes to talk, obviously, those skills served you well in your later career, and you have a lot of success. But let's think about people in the military or farmers or anyone who is in some type of profession where you're using your hands, and construction workers and so forth. We compare the differences amongst a human population and strengths and weaknesses. It's very concerning for us to kind of restrict about how somebody should be. That diversity is extremely important. So this is what I was seeing in the schools when I was working in the schools. The kids that were getting identified as ADHD from the school environment, predominantly boys who were active, predominantly boys who would later go to like VOTEC programs. So that in itself is concerning. The other group of kids that would often get identified with ADHD are ones who are having other mental health problems. And that could be anxiety, depression, horrible home environments, getting bullied, things like that. It's very difficult to focus in school when other things are capturing your attention. And that's how we're designed to be. So when we talk about ADHD not being a real diagnosis, what I mean, it's not a discrete diagnosis. It should be a rule out. It's all it is a constellation of symptoms that's being misapplied to more and more people, driving high rates of drug use. Right now, as we speak, we have an Adderall shortage in the United States, at least partially due to how many people are taking that drug.